stage companies, sometimes a little later stage. And so what we also do is, when I'm working with a company that's earlier stage, but they do have revenue, there are non-dilutive sources of capital that can pair with VC money or angel money from the state, where these companies aren't giving up equity to bring these funds in. And that's monumental when you look at a cap table and you can bring in $500,000 or $1 million from a state loan fund where you're not giving up any equity. Granted, it's maybe 9 to 12% money, but instead of giving up your stock, you're taking out a loan and no personal guarantee. There you go, Ray. Ray's been through the ringer a couple of times, secured a number of loan funds. But that money can be monumental for smaller startup companies. And I think those are really valuable tools that are offered by the state of Ohio. And there are multiple toolboxes to pull that from, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah. So do you have a story
Sure.
particular of that?
Sure. So I have a client that we're working with right now that developed some proprietary software surrounding call center space. And client had one huge, sort of similar to your Bob Evans client that you spoke of, or Tim, where they had one huge source of revenue. I think 90% of the revenue was from one client, but it was a big chunk. And for a startup entity that was bringing in $4 to $5 million of revenue per year, usually those companies don't typically look at non-dilutive capital for financing. They're kind of over the hump revenue-wise, but given the lack of stability with one large client again, we were able to secure non-dilutive capital from Jobs Ohio through a new fund that they call Gazelle, where typically some of these funds run through DSA, which is Development Services Agency. Some run through Jobs Ohio combined with DSA. And I'm getting into specifics here that you guys probably don't care about at this point, but this program...
I care if it gets me $1 million on my way to...
Right.
This program runs purely through Jobs Ohio and doesn't require sign-off by DSA, which is another governing body. So it's an agile fund. You can close pretty quickly. We haven't closed yet, but it would be a monumental piece of non-dilutive capital for this company.
And what's the profile? How many employees?
Probably close to 20 employees with a commitment to create jobs over the next 3 years, $4 to $5 million in revenue. And I think the valuation for this round of non-dilutive capital was maybe $8 to $10 million valuation.
Okay, yeah. So that's an example. That's great. Does this prompt any questions from you guys? I want to make sure I'm including you as much as is interesting in these questions, because there's some other stuff that these guys have been prepared with, and that'll probably address some things you didn't even know you should ask. But if you have questions, I'd like to hear them.
Hey guys, thanks. Just from a positioning, so it sounds like when you talk to an investor, what they're looking for is their payback, but when you pitch to a government entity or anything, how does the positioning shift, if any? Does that make sense?
It does. They'll want a first position on some IP, generally speaking. With some of these funds, there is a guaranteed payout at the end, a success fee. So it's something you're going to want to watch for. I don't know what those terms look like today, but I can follow up with you and give you more specifics on that. Sean? How you
Sean.
doing? Yeah. Good to
Was
see
your
you.
question more around how do you position yourself to get those funds?
Or,
Yeah, they're not looking, and he can better answer this than I am, but just from my work at Tech Columbus, they want to know that you're here to stay, you're growing jobs. It's a totally different pitch. It's not about getting out. It's all about staying in.
Right, and providing a competition element also. So Ohio, it's not necessarily a but-for test for that money, but they do want to see that you have options outside of Ohio to grow because they want to incentivize your project with this non-dilutive capital. And you'll have to create some sort of job commitment over a 3-year period. They can also build in caveats for revenue, and so that they'll give you this money in tranches if you hit a certain level of revenue or a certain number of jobs.
Not to mention, I don't want to assume anything. What would a VC investor, how would you position it?
Well, So positioning it to raise capital so you definitely want to position that you're growing the company for an exit. Yeah. Always moving toward that exit. as
Michelle,
quickly
this
as
is a
possible.
question for you. When you talk to these VC firms and they see that you're bringing in non-dilutive capital from state funds, is that helpful?
It's very helpful, yeah. They love to see non-dilutive capital. Yeah, they love to see it sitting there. You know, the exit's more for them, not about closing the business. It's about growing it to the point where it can be sold, right, to someone else. And so those tax credits are going to stay with that company for as long as you can keep them. And it sort of has nothing to do with the timing of an investor entering or exiting a company.
Hey, Michelle, what's their typical rate of return they're looking for, and how long before they want an exit? Is there? I know it's
And I
not
don't know
typical.
that there's anything different than it's ever been, and you may have heard these statistics before, but they expect at least one company in their portfolio to have a 10x return. And to think about the venture capital industry over the last 10 years even, that success rate has not really been there for those funds. And you know, it's different from your perspective as entrepreneurs thinking, how do I access venture capital funds, than it is from, say, my time at Battelle when I was looking at investing in venture capital funds. I'm looking for funds with great track records that only hit home runs and have teams that have been at it, you know, 3 or 4 funds deep. But when you're an entrepreneur, you're looking for something different. You're looking for someone to take a chance on you, and there's a chance you'll be that, you know, 10x guy out of the portfolio. But chances are you won't make it. I mean, the odds are against you, right? So it's a little bit of a different game.
Okay.
Michelle, how much adult supervision does the business owner get when they bring in somebody else's
I was going to say
money?
from me,
No, not
all of it,
from
unfortunately.
from the investor when they deploy capital into
Oh,
the
yeah, that's
business.
the most painful part, I think, and what a lot of entrepreneurs really don't understand. I know that Ray has a lot of experience here, but when you bring that capital in, especially if you've been running it and you've been successful and you've taken it this far and you're at this point and you feel like it's now time to bring in capital, what you have to realize is that it's a seat at the table. They're going to tell you what to do. I've been that person, and it's painful. It's hard. I try to be as nice as possible, but you're literally bringing someone in who you think is going to give you money, and you hope to God is going to give you great connections and insights and access to more capital and customers and all of the things that a good board member would bring. But this is your financial board member, and all they're bringing is rules and tracking and pressure and pushing you in a different direction. So there's a lot of that. You have to be really, really mindful that sometimes it's not worth the money. And I tell my clients that a lot of the time. If you can make it on your own, do it for as long as you can, because as soon as you bring that investor in, your plans are changing.
Yeah.